Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 5:30, and I'll call this special work session of the Burnsville City Council to order. We have a lot of guests in the room this evening, and so we're going to go around the room so that everybody knows who's in the room, and our listening public will also know who's in the room. I'm Elizabeth Kautz. I'm the mayor of the city of Burnsville.
Kara Schultz, City Council.
Dan Keeley, City Council.
Dana Hardy, Interim City Manager and Director of Administrative Services.
Joel Janik, City Attorney.
Ryan Peterson, Public Works Director.
Bill Coughlin, City Council.
Dan Gustafson, City Council.
Michelle Collins, City Clerk.
Jack Kellner, Concerned Citizen.
Great, welcome.
John Gessner, Sunday Week.
Chris, I'll come to you.
Chris Anderson, Technical Services and Business Development with Kramer.
Peter Larson, Larkin Hoffman Law Firm. I'm here with Kramer.
John Rovisto, Vice President, Kramer Mountain.
Okay, and then I'm going to go to the back row.
Kelly Stride, Finance Director, City Council. Liz Workman, Dakota County Commissioner.
George Fisher, Dakota County Environmental Resources.
Welcome.
Richard McGowan, Heavy Equipment Operator.
Welcome.
Dan Lawson, Richard's aunt and Michael's sister.
Welcome. Welcome.
Mike O'Connor, Waste Management Consultant.
Vince Workman, Burnsville Planning Commission.
Robert Timmerman, Planning Commission.
Ryan Fagan, Council Candidate.
Mike Miller, Waste Management.
Kirsten Pauley, Sunday Engineering.
Nick Bono, Carlson McCain.
Earl Heaps, City of Burnsville Consultant,
Very good.
Jim Bradrick, City Council Candidate.
Julie Ketchum, Waste Management.
Todd Hartman with Waste Management.
Welcome. Good to have you all here. And we have one item on this agenda, and it is the KMM Quarry and the BSLI landfill expansion discussion. Dana Hardy, you're going to tee this up, and then we'll also hear from Ryan, and then from John and perhaps Mike also.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. First of all, as we've got a great turnout here this evening and lots of things going on in the city, and I want to thank everyone for giving up another evening to be with us here to talk about some of the concepts and to be educated and learn more about some of the new information that's come forward in the recent months. That being said, Ms. Faulkner, Jenny Faulkner, our Community Development Director, had a family emergency, so she was not able to be with us here this evening and does send her regrets, but has left the presentation in the capable hands of our Public Works Director, Ryan Peterson. So he will be doing a lot of the heavy lifting here for the city's portion, and then we'll turn it over to Kirsten to, she's representing and presenting on behalf of both companies, Kramer and Waste Management here this evening. That being said, in your packets, your backgrounds, you received a lengthy, quite lengthy background that really just described context on some historical content and how we got here today, and then propose some of the concepts that we've been looking at. In the last 4 months, we've had some really great dialogue with both Kramer and with Waste Management, and some of as they've been very forward and very working with staff to present us some information that's new information, and then just trying to brainstorm how that would fit in with what they're trying to accomplish, and then could there be some way for us to partner to reach our end vision and what we want to do with Freeway, so that is also a part of that. There is no staff recommendation at this time. There is no application before us at this time. So the purpose of the work session here this evening is really to present information, give a little bit of historical context on where we've been and potentially where we're going. And so if you're seeing something in the background material, if you hear something here that gives you a little bit of heartburn, this would be an opportunity for us to receive back as staff, because we anticipate that that we'll continue to have dialogue around these topics, and it would help us get a better sense of where the council would like us to how the council would like us to proceed in the future. So, and then likewise, if there's anything that you love or are really excited about, that would be good information for us to have as well. So on that, Ryan Peterson, our Public Works Director, will kick us off in providing some of that historical content. And if you could advance just before I hand that over to him, we just kind of put together a little bit of an agenda so everybody has an idea of where we're going. And so part of the historical context and giving an overview of the sites, then we'll go into what the current approvals are. So what their current operations look like and how that fits in with what's happening now, the status on the freeway landfill and the freeway dump. And then we'll be looking at some of those concepts that were outlined in the background. And then for those who haven't had an opportunity to see that, we'll be talking through those concepts here this evening. And then we'll open it back up for council discussion.
Okay, very good. Thank you. It's good that we're giving history because we need to have the history to understand what's in place, what was approved, and then what are we doing moving forward as we see concepts. Okay, Ryan?
Sounds good. And I'm not gonna go from the beginning of time up to now, but I am going to show you what, is currently approved. So just for everybody's, understanding of all the different things that we're talking about, where the arrow's going is 35W. And then, this is the Union Pacific Railroad, down in this area. 13 is just, maybe a quarter mile to half mile south. So this is an extreme northwest portion of the city, also known as the northern part of the Minnesota River Quadrant. So the different areas we'll be looking at, and I guess also it should be noted that that's the Minnesota River up here, and then that's the city of Bloomington. So we'll be looking at the BSLI, or the Waste Management Landfill, the Kramer Mining Materials Quarry, the freeway dump, and the freeway landfill will all be discussed. Oops, wrong way. All right, so I'll get into the approvals of both the quarry and the landfill. I thought it might be helpful to outline what property is owned by what entity out here. And don't take these red lines as gospel, they are roughly drawn, but it is a fairly accurate representation of the approximate boundaries. So the entire exterior side here is owned by Kramer. This particular red area is basically what would be considered the mine in general. It's not all active, but would be part of their operation. This little area here, Kramer also owns a bridge building business, and that's a big yard that they have. And then this area is basically open and has a lot of wildlife. If you were on the tour today, that was what they were discussing, all this area. So what is the current Kramer approval? So basically, this is the far west edge of the mine. This is the dike road that you can go on that stops flooding from going over whenever you're, whenever we do have river flooding. And then this is the far east side of the mine. Once again, this is that bridge building area. And then they have some industrial uses down here. What was approved in 2016 was basically an expansion of the mining to the west, and that's in this red area. You could argue, I don't know if in exchange is the right word, but I'll use it, in exchange for keeping a larger area on the east available for future development. So basically, they're gonna take more of the limestone out here, and then it'll be, when it turns into a lake, there'll be some sculpting of it to help it be more of a, not just a straight drop off, but there is valuable limestone in this area that they will be using. Also, this area in the former guide plan or MRQ plan was shown as a city park, and now that's been moved over to here in this location. This area at this point is still designated as industrial, so to have the park right next to that didn't make a whole lot of sense. So the city was in agreement with Kramer to move the park area over here, and then it'll also be closer. If this turns into some residential, obviously the park would be closer. So that is the current state of the Kramer PUD. Also, just for information, we do collect an aggregate tax on the aggregates that is mined out of here. On the waste management or BSLI parcel, so once again, the exterior red line is the land, or roughly represents the land owned by waste management, and the interior one is much more the active PUD area. So when you see the map, you can get a feel for what this is. Maybe I will back up one. So right off the map is Savage, and then Cargill owns this area that is just, so Cargill does own a little bit of land in Burnsville. All right. So the current approval for waste management goes back to 2009 with the big PUD. Prior to then, if you follow the line here, this was the PUD or the approval for waste management. When they came in 2009, they wanted some more opportunity, and we worked with them to get that done. This area here is considered the North Development Area, and it looks like it was back in 2009. There is no liner put in. It's the exact same as it was. And then this was the West Development Area, and that is active now. The liner's down, and garbage is being filled there actively. This is a screenshot taken out of the PUD approval. This shows what the end-use plan. So you can't take this literally. This was how the golf holes were going to lay out. But this showed that a golf course was planned out there. I think this was 15 of the 18 holes or something like that. And then there were 3 more that were going to be down the low, so that might be playable if it's not wet out. But so the end-use plan back in 2009 did include a golf course as part of it. And also included with that is host fees and tipping fees that the city and Dakota County both collect. Freeway landfill and freeway dump cleanup status. So the 2 areas in red, they're 2 separate facilities. The freeway landfill owned by the McGowan family is approximately as shown in the red area here. This is 35W and Black Dog Road, that U.S. Salt facility is there. That's known as the freeway landfill. The MPCA, I would tell you, there's approximately 5 million cubic yards of waste in this location. And then the freeway dump is in this spot right here, also owned by the McGowan family. There's significantly less here, but I still think it's in the area of around 1 million cubic yards of waste that is located in this area. This is where the driving range is now, for reference. Status, well, I guess first of all, cleanup of those sites is the city's #1 legislative priority that we have year after year. Once the Kramers are done mining, the water will rise, that's a fact, and it will be going up into trash that's located in those sites. So our #1 priority is to get that cleaned up so that our drinking water is safe. If we can get developable land out of the deal, awesome, but the #1 priority, whether that happens or not, would be to have this done. The MPCA is also very aware of this, so the landfills are in the closed landfill process. There has been it hasn't been adequate funding to make it happen yet, but the closed landfill process would work by keeping the waste that are on those 2 sites, keeping it there. They would just keep moving it back and forth. They'd put a liner down, move some back, and then you'd end up with basically going up where the current landfill is. And then the PCA would end up having to maintain those 2 landfills into perpetuity. One thing to consider on that, the funding of the cleanup is extremely important. If it does get bonded for, then I believe it's 37 and a half years, it's a number similar to that, where it can't be used for development. If we're gonna pay for it via bonding, then the land can't be used for development. The current state, they've funded the design of the cleanup, and I think they're or the 30% design, so they have a plan or they're working on a plan that's to the 30% point of having the on-site method go. And you're gonna hear different thoughts on how that could be done, and perhaps not have 3 landfills closed in Burnsville, but move it down to 1, and that will be one of the primary things. So with that, I don't know if you have any questions for myself on the current state of the approvals or the landfill process.
Any questions? I think we're good.
Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten Polly with Sunday
Yeah.
Engineering, and I believe a representative from both Waste Management and Kramer will be joining her up
Okay.
here.
Good, Kirsten. Welcome, and you and Mike are going to be at the table, and John?
Yeah, and John as well.
Okay, very good. And so just so that everybody knows that Mike McGowan and his family is in the room too, because part of all of the discussion that's going on tonight also includes your property, Mike. So, just so everybody knows who is in the room and who are the players. Okay.
So,
Kristen.
good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Kirsten Pauley. I'm a civil engineer and a geologist and president of Sunday Engineering located in Bloomington, Minnesota. And tonight, I'm here on behalf of both Kramer Mining and Materials and Waste Management in their joint effort to amend their PUDs. And basically, a concept stage PUD amendment is the first step in a number of necessary steps to reach a preferred alternative to the closure of the freeway landfill, and in a manner that protects the environment and protects the future drinking water, and also maximizes the opportunity for end-use development and redevelopment of not just the freeway landfill properties, but the entire Minnesota river quadrant. So,
Okay. So let's just be clear, because your slide says that it's a proposed PUD amendment. Tonight, we're not making any decisions.
correct, we are
And we don't
introducing.
have an application before
Correct.
us. So I just want to make it clear to everybody, there is no application before us. This is thoughts of what you all want to do.
Correct. And one of the takeaways from tonight that we're hoping to get is some direction on process. Is that the right process? We believe it is, but we would like feedback, direction, and guidance so that we can chart a path forward. So before I get started, I wanted to make a few introductions, but we've already gone around the room and introduced everyone. But just again, Mike
Miller.
Miller from Burnsville Landfill, and John Ravisto and Chris Anderson are here with us, as well as some other members of the Kramer and Waste Management team. So it's a team effort, and we really appreciate the opportunity to come and sit down in a workshop session with the council and the staff, and to get feedback and hopefully, like I said, guidance and a path forward. So the focus of our discussion today is really the Minnesota River Quadrant, and this is an area within the city that has been identified in the comprehensive plan as a focus area, and one that really represents the single largest opportunity for development and redevelopment within the city of Burnsville. It's an area that encompasses the land just south of the Minnesota River and north of Highway 13, west of I-35, and east of the county line between Dakota County and Scott County. And the 2040 Comprehensive Plan has a vision for this area of higher development with a broad range of land uses. And these would include business, retail, office, industrial, residential, waterfront residential that takes advantage of the river and the future Quarry Lake, and also some significant amounts of open space and recreation areas to allow some interface between the public and the riverfront and the Quarry Lakes. The alternatives that we're going to be discussing tonight really come from an initiative started by some of the landowners. In the northern Minnesota River Quadrant area, there are three major landowners that are situated, and we've heard a little bit about each one of those. So Kramer Mining and Materials, they are located in the middle of the property, and let's see if I can...
Yep, there's your cursor.
There we go. Yep. So they're in the middle, and they have they control about 575 acres. I can't see from this distance now. So there is a, and then Waste Management, and so Kramer Mining and Materials control the middle portion, and then Waste Management is to the west, and they operate the Burnsville landfill. And they also control a significant amount of land. And then the freeway properties located in the north control a total of about 215 acres, which includes the property to the east of I-35W. So The initiative is really, has presented some opportunity for these stakeholders as well as the city of Burnsville to work together to really change the outcome of future uses within this Minnesota River Quadrant area. The crux of the issue is really how the landfill, the freeway landfill cleanup will proceed. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has developed an alternative, and we'll be discussing that tonight along with another preferred alternative. And so the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, they've recommended this as their alternative. I'll refer to it tonight as the MPCA alternative. And essentially, it envisions closure of the freeway landfill in a manner that really ends up with some significant limitations on how you could eventually develop and redevelop the freeway property in the area adjacent to it.
So, Kristen, we need to also make it very clear to everybody listening what they're proposing has to do with bonds where every person in the state of Minnesota is paying for it. So let's be clear of the limitations around why they're proposing this. They're not developers, and why why that land can't be developed. So and what Kramer and Waste Management is bringing to the table is an alternative that will allow the land to be developed, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So that means the citizens of Minnesota are not going to be paying for this cleanup.
Correct.
That's right. And so the only way that the MPCA can say this is the alternative and this is the way it'll look is because it's going to be paid by the people of Minnesota to do this work. And therefore, you can't touch it for 37 and a half years because that's how the bonds run.
Bonding works, yes. So under the MPCA's alternative, there would be a rebuilding of the landfill on the freeway property, which would include approximately 98 acres of both landfill footprint and then a 200-foot compliance boundary around the landfill. And they would close and cap the landfill and then would control and guide the land uses that were allowed in that area. And also, as the mayor has indicated, if the general obligation bonds are used to finance this project, which is what the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's plan is, it essentially puts a freeze on any portions of the properties that those general obligation bond funds were used for the cleanup activities. There's a freeze of 37 and a half years on any portion of the property where those funds were used. So this Minnesota Pollution Control Agency alternative does provide the protection for the groundwater and the drinking water and human health and the environment, but it does fall short of being able to attain the city's vision on actually having some end-use development of high value in this area.
Dan?
Good question. The visual would imply, could you go back to the previous slide? That visual would imply that the entire current freeway landfill would be a pyramid. And when you refer to land that could not be developed on, can you sort of give an idea of what land would be cleaned up but would not be part of that pyramid?
Yes, and I have a slide when I'll talk
Yeah.
a little more specifically about the PCA, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's alternative, and I'll have a plan view that shows exactly that layout.
Where they also offer cash rather than just all bond, some cash. So it'll allow it to be built.
Right, so if there are portions that are closed and cleaned up that don't use those general obligation
Yeah.
bonds, those could continue to be developed on. And what those divisions are and where those areas are, I don't know that those details have been actually determined yet.
Great, thank you.
And Joel, jump in here if we say anything that is not within the purview of our legal status.
Fair enough. So the preferred alternative really is a collaboration of landowners, the city of Burnsville, and other stakeholders that can influence and perhaps change the current trajectory of the alternatives to closure of the freeway landfill and end up with a vision that is much more in line with the city's comprehensive plan. So, the preferred alternative has a number of different stakeholders who are involved. It is, of course, the city and the community, the landowners within the Minnesota River Quadrant. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has a lot of regulatory authority over the landfills and the things that are proposed. They also are responsible for the closure and overseeing the closure of the landfill. There's also many other regulators that are involved. Dakota County, who's here tonight, as well as there's things like wetland issues and FEMA. So there's many different moving parts and many different levels of other agency and other stakeholder involvement. So tonight, what I'd like to do is just focus on three things. The first is the freeway landfill and the two alternatives, the MPCA alternative and the preferred alternative. And then I'd like to talk specifically about what Waste Management and Kramer Mining and Materials would like to propose as amendments to their facilities in order to basically take the first step towards many of the subsequent steps that are needed in order to realize this preferred alternative. And then I'd like to end with a little bit of a discussion about the city process, what we feel would be the appropriate city process, what the benefits of getting solid city support for the preferred alternative is, and then a little bit about schedule, because there are so many different permits and things that are required to be completed that schedule becomes very critical as we look at actually reaching the preferred alternative outcomes. So for the crux of the issue is how the freeway landfill will be closed and redeveloped. And so what does that mean for achieving the goals of protecting the environment, protecting our drinking water, and then creating a good opportunity for future development? Some of the background on the freeway landfill, I think, is helpful to put the issue of why this closure is such an important issue. And I think, we heard that it's one of the number one issues with the city of Burnsville. And the landfill was operated from 1969 to 1990, and this was a time before the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency had the current locational standards, before they had their current environmental controls, and a lot of the regulations that now govern solid waste landfills. And so when the landfill was active, there was no line or a leachate collection system, for example, required. No landfill gas extraction system required. And there was just waste placed in an area that was originally a wetland. The landfill was placed on the federal Superfund list back in the mid-'80s, and it's still on that list. The majority of concerns are related to groundwater contamination. And the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency is responsible for planning and administering the proper closure of this landfill at this point. And as I talk about this, I will, as I talk about the landfill, the freeway landfill cleanup, it also includes the freeway dump, which is located on about 27 acres. That's on the eastern side of I-35W. So I mentioned that the main concern is really groundwater contamination. And back when the landfill was active in the same condition that exists today, waste was located above the water table. Pumping from the adjacent Kramer quarry has lowered the water table beneath the freeway landfill, and it's created basically an artificial separation between all of the waste and the groundwater. And when the Kramer quarry comes to close and the limestone's exhausted, they will discontinue pumping, and those groundwater levels will recover. And they'll recover to the point that models show that the waste will actually be in direct contact with the groundwater. And so that waste has a very high potential to leach contaminants into the groundwater. And also as a result of no longer pumping in the quarry, the groundwater flow directions also become modified. And so groundwater flow models have predicted that the potentially contaminated groundwater can flow to the Minnesota River as well as to the Quarry Lake. And this puts those water bodies at risk, as well as the city water intake, which is located in the very southern portion of the future Quarry Lake. So that's the reason why this is such an important issue. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's alternative, and this is where we get to see the footprint of potentially developable property and the landfill footprint. The Minnesota has recommended that the closure be one of digging up all the existing waste and placing it to the side, building up an area to construct a liner and a leachate collection system, building that liner and leachate collection system, replacing all of the waste on that footprint, and in an effort to minimize the size of the footprint, essentially building that waste up into a pyramid type form. In addition, then, there's a 200-foot compliance boundary that is located around that landfill footprint. And with the original Minnesota Pollution Control Agency plan, it encompassed about 60 acres of new lined landfill with about a 90-acre compliance boundary. And the area to the blue that you see on this figure would potentially be developable if portions of it were cleaned up without using those general obligation bonds. The Minnesota Pollution Control estimated that this cleanup project will take about 5 years once they have obtained sufficient funding. And then once the landfill is closed, they will have the they have the guidance and authority as to what happens on that landfill. They're responsible for the long-term closure of the landfill once the construction project's actually completed. Since they originally proposed this plan, the Pollution Control Agency has also decided that the waste that's located in the freeway dump should also be brought over and incorporated into this landfill closure. And that means that there's an additional approximately 1 million cubic yards of waste that need to be added to that original design. And so what that does is it expands the footprint a little bit to about 64 acres, and then it also will increase the compliance boundary. So now we're looking at about a 98-acre portion of the property that would be encumbered with the landfill and compliance boundary. It also would cause the height of the landfill design to go up about 14 feet in order to accommodate that additional 1 million cubic yards of waste. We talked about the fact that if these general obligation bonds are used, we need to, that limits the potential for development. Now, it's possible that there would be some other funding mechanisms for a portion of this, for example, to keep the transfer station operating. Again, I'm not sure that the details of exactly where those lines would be have been determined at this point. Ultimately, also, it doesn't address the potential for any residual contamination that may be present in the limestone beneath the waste, and that could potentially have the potential to leach contaminants in the future as well. So in summary, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's alternative, their closure alternative leaves some major gaps between their end use for the property after the closure and the 2040 comprehensive plan, which envisions the waterfront residential and industrial office on the freeway properties. So obviously with the landfill there, the residential land use is not going to be compatible. It also limits some of the redevelopment potential of the adjacent Kramer properties. And thirdly, I think it's important that it establishes this new landfill right at the northern gateway to the city of Burnsville. So the preferred alternative is something that's been being discussed in the last several months with a lot of momentum, I think, and essentially it involves Kramer taking control of the freeway landfill properties, performing the cleanup work for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and doing this by conveying waste underneath the I-35W freeway through a conveyor corridor under the freeway onto the Kramer property, and then also moving the waste from the freeway landfill along an existing haul route directly to the waste management property. They can do these in large haul trucks, not in their off-road haul trucks, and that actually then reduces the length of the haul. It reduces the cost of the haul. If you were to do this, anybody else, you would have to use public road right-of-ways. This eliminates all the use of public road right-of-ways and the risk that assumes. So that's a major aspect of it. Also, it contemplates mining the bedrock, portions of the bedrock on the freeway landfill property, which would remove any of that residual contamination and eliminate that concern. It also, the plan also envisions waste management then accepting all of that waste, which amounts to a total of about, the estimate right now is about 6 million cubic yards. And it also then consolidates the landfill footprints into one footprint that's located more distant from that northern gateway of the city of Burnsville. Also, from a timing perspective, in order to complete this work, it's thought that based on the current estimates of waste that are in the landfill, that it would be about a 2-year period of activity for closure, as opposed to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's period of 5 years. The preferred alternative is much more in line with the 2040 Comprehensive Plan vision. The preferred alternative would not use the general obligation bond so that there would not be the 37.5-year freeze on development. And the end use, the shaping of the end use could be consistent with the 2040 vision of residential waterfront uses as well as some mixed uses. It would be compatible then with high-end development on the Kramer property. And it would guide it would allow a lot of the area in the northern portion that's adjacent to the river into natural spaces, open space, parks, and trails. And then it also moves the landfill footprint away from the Gateway District, consolidating both the freeway dump and the freeway landfill footprint into one area on the Burnsville landfill site. So the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency conducted a feasibility study when they were looking at the alternatives, and their recommended alternative, they came up with a cost estimate initially of $64.4 million. Since that time, they have decided that they also want to include the freeway dump in the closure project. And when they went to the legislature in 2018, their proposal included, for capital bonding, increased the amount of their request to more than $86 million. Now, since that time, they're continuing to work on developing plans and investigating these sites. And the cost estimate continues to rise for the MPCA alternative. Additional areas of investigation, better define the waste limits and other design factors. Verbally, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has indicated to Kramer and others that the estimate is now approaching $100 million. So the cost estimate keeps rising. Alternatively, with the preferred alternative, the Pollution Control Agency also looked at an alternative to relocate waste to the Burnsville landfill as one of their initial feasibility analysis and alternatives, and they estimated that that would cost $135 million or more. Because of due largely to the unique position of the Kramer Quarry and the Waste Management Burnsville landfill and the initiative of the property owners, the initial cost estimate, if they're involved, can actually decrease from this initial cost estimate, bringing it down to an amount that is either very similar or the same as what the MPCA is now estimating for their recommended cost estimate. And I think that's really important because that financial disparity may have really played a part in the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's recommendation of their preferred alternative. So, let's see.
Bill?
So in English, does that mean that you're saying that the estimate is 100 million comparable and not 135 million as the estimate? Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
So at this time, Kramer and Waste Management would like to propose amendments to their existing PUDs. And these amendments would then allow them to continue to pursue this preferred alternative. The Kramer Mining and Materials amendment is to expand their quarry by 72 acres. Right now, a little bit of background is that the quarry opened in 1959, and it was initially used to supply aggregates for the construction of the original 35W. The city originally approved PUD in 1994, and it was most recently amended in 2016. The Kramer quarry is one of only 3 limestone quarries in the metropolitan area that supplies high-quality aggregates. Aggregates are a diminishing natural resource. They're needed for construction, development, redevelopment, and in the metropolitan area, the availability of aggregates in general is decreasing as development covers potential sources. So expanding the quarry and allowing the utilization of this resource is one aspect of the proposal. Reclamation under the current PUD envisions a end-use quarry lake, mixed use, some industrial uses, and recreation and open space. So the PUD application would be the proposed amendment would be to expand the mine by 72 acres. It includes an area of about 26 acres located in the southwest corner of the quarry that is currently planned for industrial end uses. And then it also includes an area on the eastern portion of the quarry to expand that by about 46 acres. And portions of this area are proposed to be mined and then backfilled with structural fill to allow future development over portions of that eastern portion of the quarry to allow then development consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. The proposed amendments basically provide flexibility for final end uses, and they also allow for the approvals of the freeway landfill project to relocate that waste. They provide an opportunity for enhanced lake perimeter contours by mining out these additional areas and support the 2040 vision in the comprehensive plan. They also maintain a major portion of the local economic engine. Some of the revenue generated from the Kramer quarry is in the form of property taxes. There's been about $2.5 million, a little over $2.5 million in property taxes paid in the last 5 years. Over 200,000 of those dollars have gone directly to the city of Burnsville. There's also an aggregate tax that's placed on every ton of aggregate material that's removed from the quarry. And in the past 5 years, almost $500,000 has gone directly to the city of Burnsville. The proposed amendment will generate an estimated $6 million more in additional aggregate tax revenue, about $2.5 million to the city, and this money goes into the general fund for use in maintenance and construction of roads and bridges and other projects. There's also additional financial benefit that the Kramer quarry extends to the community. They're a significant employer with about 40 employees of high-paying mining jobs. These are family-sustaining jobs. There's also an annual payroll of over $4 million, and that money filters into the local economy. The quarry supports approximately 35 additional full-time jobs in trucking, and there's a multiplier effect that's been analyzed from mining jobs, and essentially the 40 employee and 35 additional trucking jobs generates an additional 60 job opportunities in the community, providing services and and, I have to go back. Services and other support to the mining operation. And Kramer Mining and Materials is also a routine supporter of local community activities and causes. So a little bit about the waste management proposal. Waste Management is proposing to increase their airspace capacity. A little bit of background, the landfill was permitted by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency in 1971. It was most recently, the permit was reissued in 2015. The city of Burnsville currently has a PUD, it says issued in 2004, I believe it was actually 2006, which includes approval of what is been described as the NDA, or North Development Area, which is located up here, and that has been permitted for demolition construction material, and the Western Development Area, which is the current MSW fill area. The landfill also operates a gas-to-energy facility. The remaining airspace capacity at the landfill for MSW, or municipal solid waste, is about 1.6 million cubic yards as of April 2018, and that remaining capacity includes cap material. The remaining life expectancy of the landfill for MSW is approximately 3 to 4 years. Currently, there's a fill rate of about 450,000 cubic yards per year, and Waste Management has the ability to divert the waste stream to other facilities to extend the life to about 2022. Now, the remaining airspace capacity for construction and demolition is it's over 7 million cubic yards. And the difference between municipal solid waste and construction and demolition, they're two different waste types, and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency permits them separately. They have separate cells, they have different liner requirements, and so even though there's 7 million cubic yards of airspace that's available for construction demolition, it's not useful or suitable for the municipal solid waste disposal. So the other aspect of the construction and demolition waste is that it doesn't come in at nearly the same rate that municipal solid waste does. And so with a fill rate of about 30,000 tons per year, the estimated life of the expectancy of the landfill is 200 years or so. The upshot of it is that the final closure of the landfill is decades away because of the capacity of this construction and demolition debris. The proposed amendment is to increase the airspace capacity by a maximum of 26 million cubic yards. This would be done in part by converting 7 million of that construction demolition airspace to municipal solid waste. And then the rest would be from build out for an additional 19 million cubic yards.
What would that look like, 26 million cubic yards in terms of airspace? How much higher is that going to be, Mike? I mean, from somebody's visual, from 13, looking out to your plant, how much higher?
This maximum design takes it up 260 feet higher than what we're currently at,
260 feet higher.
and comes in at the peak. It would be 260. That's their maximum.
So which means that your end-use plan that is approved on the books right now for a golf course is going to change.
Correct.
So you're going to come in, and so what we're going to have to look at is what is the benefit then to the community.
Correct.
So there's a lot of moving parts here, guys. You still have to have that first conversation with McGowan.
Correct. So, and there has been conversations with McGowan.
But a lot, because you still are talking about tunneling under the 35W, and the work is already taking place. You have to have that conversation with MnDOT, not us.
We have, Mayor. We've already had initial conversations with Charlie Zelli, Commissioner of Department of Transportation, and his staff. He is, last Thursday, he directed his staff to investigate this. They've already are active on investigation. We know that for fact because not only the engineers from our bridge division and Ames and Kramer Mining, we've already had several conversations post-commissioner meeting. They're very active in exploring this, the culvert option, so.
Okay. A lot of moving parts because I also like to make sure that Commissioner Workman and George are also part of this because the county is involved in a lot of things. You threw out a lot of numbers also in terms of how much more the increase is. And in reading my background, you were saying that you will increase the host fees on both sides?
We are looking at a potential host fee increase, correct?
And I'm going to say this, it's
Madam Mayor,
nice.
if I may inject,
Yeah.
could we finish the rest of the presentation before we start
Yeah,
passing?
because I'm just wanting to understand the height, but go ahead with all of that. But there's a lot of moving pieces, yes.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Kirsten, just for a point of reference, can you translate what the cubic yards would mean for tons? What does that look like for tons?
About 1-to-1.
1-to-1. Thank you.
For MSW, it's about 1-to-1.
Thank you.
It's a little bit less than that.
A little bit less.
So this design and that 26 million cubic yards of potential airspace is a maximum capacity. Engineering design will likely lower that elevation somewhat and change and naturalize the final contour, which also then reduces the total airspace capacity as well. So aspects to the proposal are that there would be sufficient airspace capacity to accommodate the freeway landfill and the dump, which is now estimated at about 6 million cubic yards. The proposal would be to actually reduce the footprint of the landfill from 217 acres to 204 acres, and to reduce wetland impacts, size and quality from the existing permitted footprint. It would increase the elevation to a maximum of 1,082 feet above mean sea level. And it would update the end use, as you indicated, to facilitate increased flexibility, continuity, and compatibility with the adjacent end uses and development within the MRQ. I mentioned that it would reduce the overall footprint of the permitted facility, which is shown here in orange. And the proposed amendment would reduce that in size from 217 to 214 acres, or 204 acres, which is shown by the light blue line here. But in addition, by accommodating the freeway waste, it would eliminate the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's proposal to establish the 94-acre footprint and the compliance boundary on the freeway property. So there was a total potential of 107 acres of reduced landfill footprint compliance boundary compared to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's alternative. And it also will provide the opportunity to consolidate the existing 3 waste footprints into a single landfill footprint that's located further from the Gateway District. The proposed amendment also has end-use potential. The landfill itself has to develop in accordance with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's guidance. The end-use potential is to develop the riverfront property before final closure of the actual landfill. This would be envisioned to be some open space, trail system, and recreational opportunity. There's the ability to enhance and diversify and restore wetlands and adjacent riverfront area, and to edge match with the adjacent Kramer property and that natural area that's proposed north of their quarry lake. There's also some opportunity to explore some interim uses on the landfill probably related to energy, solar, methane, vehicle fueling, things of that nature. Currently, the state and the county and the city receive revenues in the form of various fees collected at the landfill. With the remaining airspace capacity, there's an estimated $29 million of fees remaining to be paid over the course of the next 4 years to these government entities. With the proposed PUD amendment and the increase in airspace at a maximum of 26 million cubic yards, those fees are estimated to be closer to $370 million and take place over the course of the next 40 to 50 years. Looking at just the city of Burnsville and the potential revenue stream generated from the PUD amendment, under the existing condition with the landfill closing within the next 4 years, there's a total between tipping fees and host fees of future revenues of about 5.6 million estimated. And with the preferred alternative and the amendments to the CUP, there'd be the opportunity to collect approximately $73.6 million in additional revenues. And these are based on the maximum airspace capacity of the 26 million cubic yards, which I indicated probably will be lowered because of final engineering design somewhat. They also assume that there's no fees collected for the transfer of waste from the Freeway landfill to the Burnsville landfill, so no host fees or tipping fees are collected. And they also are based on the existing host fee rate that Waste Management pays. And as you've heard, Waste Management is willing to discuss an increase in those fees with the amendment. So, in addition to those financial benefits, there's some additional financial benefit. There would be the continued collecting and hauling of waste from all of the city's facilities, which results in savings to the city of about $100,000 annually. Continuation of involvement in local businesses and contributing to the local economy and community, and a combined influx of annual operating expenses into the state and local community from fuel, parts, service contracts, labor, taxes, in excess of $5 million a year. The proposed amendment also supports the vision of the preferred alternative of relocating the landfill waste from Freeway to the Burnsville landfill. Waste Management would accept that waste at a significantly reduced tipping fee, and this is made possible by the additional airspace capacity that's being requested. They would be able to integrate end-use development with that of the adjacent Kramer and Freeway properties, expanding the riverfront connectivity and trail system. And they would be able to accept the waste from, and accepting the waste from Freeway would consolidate the 3 landfill footprints that we talked about into one, and allow development of the Freeway landfill and the dump site within the 37.5-year development timeframe if there's an alternative funding mechanism that is approved. And it also eliminates then 94 acres of landfill and compliance boundary associated with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's preferred closure plan for the landfill freeway, for the Freeway landfill. So I'd like to kind of end by a little bit of a discussion on the city process. From Waste Management and Kramer's perspective, they basically were envisioning or are envisioning a process where they would apply for individual concept stage PUD amendments. The concept PUD approval process will enable them to move forward with subsequent steps. There's, as Mayor has indicated, there's many different steps and moving parts here. One of those steps is mandatory environmental review. Both the Kramer proposal to expand the mining limits by 72 or 74 acres requires mandatory environmental assessment worksheet. And the waste management proposal to increase airspace capacity is a mandatory environmental impact statement, EIS category. And so final approvals can't be issued until environmental review is complete. So a concept stage approval process would allow them to proceed and pursue those environmental reviews. There's also many, many other permits and steps to be completed. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency issues solid waste permits. They also issue a certificate of need, which is another component of this project. Dakota County has permitting authority, as well as the FEMA and Corps of Engineers regarding wetlands and the riverfront. So the final development stage PUD approvals would come then after environmental review and these other permitting steps are completed. And the final development stage PUD approvals then set the stage for obtaining the required approvals for the freeway landfill closure under the preferred alternative. So with that, in summary, the approval of proposed concept stage PUD amendment will help the state to move forward when they're seeking alternative funding sources. The state, the PCA needs to see local support when they go to the legislature to look at alternative sources of funding. And so a concept stage PUD approval would give them that, that recognition of local support that they could use to take forward to seek alternative funding sources. It would also provide the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency with acknowledgement of local support when they're looking at the certificate of need and the issuing the certificate of need that would be required for the Burnsville landfill. And the approval of the concept stage PUD amendments would also enable both Kramer and Waste Management to move forward with the next steps of the process, including the environmental reviews, other agency permits needed for final development stage PUD approvals, and ultimately those final approvals of the preferred landfill closure and redevelopment. So a lot of information, but that is basically the concepts that we want to discuss with you. We are welcome to open this up to questions, discussion. We're really hoping to get feedback and direction to be able to chart a path to move forward.
I'm going to go to Councilmember Gustafson, then Councilmember Coughlin, and Councilmember Keeley. And Commissioner Workman and George, please come to the table, because you all are part of this. And we're working with you, and if you can just slide, no, you stay there. I need the attorney, and just slide over here. Because I know that because some of your agreements have a direct relationship to what happens in the city of Burnsville as well. So if you can just slide slide your chairs over here. And- Yeah.
My question is, if these PUDs are approved, how long will that prolong the mining and the waste management site?
Let me handle that.
Yeah, there we go. I'm just going to try to get to input and discussion. Oh, there we go.
The 72 additional acres would represent somewhere around 20 years of additional mining at our current extraction rates.
Yeah.
You know, it's extraction dependent, but at our current rate, it's about 20 years of mining.
That kind of falls in line with our anticipated development time anyways in that area. Right, thank you.
Okay, Bill?
I always worry about the money. So
Yeah.
the 100 million, your idea is that you'll go back to the legislature and say, we could, with the sort of the general support, give us 100 million, we'll do it for 100 million. And that the city, you're not looking to the city of Burnsville to participate, you're looking for your own selves and your own pocket plus the state then? Because you didn't talk about the money. Alternative funding is, those are just words, so.
Yeah.
Is that what your idea is?
And that's a great question, and to that effect, we are meeting with MMB State Minnesota Management and Budget Office next week, and to discuss alternative mechanisms to find, other than general obligation bonding money for this project. But it is not our intention, nor has it been part of any conversation to come to the city of Burnsville to pony up for this project. What our main goal is to find and Peter could speak to this even more so, but in general, our goal is to find a funding mechanism other than GO bonds that will allow us to develop this and not sterilize this property for 37 and a half years. Now, it's not, it's the same amount of money that we're looking at in big blobs right now, whether it's $100 million of GO bonds or $100 million of other revenues, could be a revenue bond or other funding. It's just with a preferred outcome.
Right.
Yeah.
I just care who,
Yeah.
Right.
who's
Yeah.
paying the freight.
Peter,
Yeah.
anything more to that?
Yeah. You had a follow-up before I shift over?
What he's talking about. Should it happen that the state doesn't follow through and you can't get the funding for it, would you just continue just on mining then for the next 30 years and the landfill thing would disappear, or?
Yes, our PUD is independent of freeway landfill.
Okay.
We have a hope and a wish and a vision, but we also have a PUD that's first and foremost.
That's the 72 acres.
That's correct, madam.
Okay. Dan?
Thank you. It's a great vision and a great hope, and it looks a lot nicer than the pyramid. At this point, I'm assuming this is very concept. You're having a lot of meetings, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And what you're looking for us tonight is where's the city, what's the city's position from the city council on, how we would approach this or respond to this or support this. And so specifically, what is it that you want from us tonight? Or is this really just bringing us in a public manner to the process so we can see what you've been working on and then lend our comments?
Well, I believe that we would like guidance on city process to actually make permit applications for concept stage approvals for the two PUD requests, because they are they're the next step. We talked, I guess I didn't talk much about schedule, but because there's such a lengthy environmental review and obtaining certificate of need and other processes, they need this approval to start moving forward with these. Waste Management has a limited airspace capacity. They can extend their life out to about 4 years. And so it's really critical to the success of this preferred alternative that we start on some of these longer approval processes, and these PUD amendments are that first step. We need those to be able to move forward with the rest, and because of the timing, we are prepared to submit.
Dan, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, well, it is presented as a package, but there's clearly two very different PUD amendments. And one, from my perspective, is rather urgent, and that's BSLIs. Because the city relies heavily on the $1.3 million that we get. We're absorbing $500,000 this year and for the next few years because of the change. But when we're a city that hosts a landfill, that land can never be developed. And so in lieu of property tax revenue that we would be taking in off all of those acres, we're taking in host and tipping fees to compensate for that loss. And so to see the forecast of 2022 and potentially, because it takes a long time for all of those hurdles to be succeeded where BSLI can continue to take in trash, we may be looking at a potential drop-off where no revenue comes in from it, which impacts the city. And so from my perspective, I believe both PUDs are important, and I believe we should pursue both of them. One of them has a very tight timeline in my mind, and the urgency is omnipresent. It almost, I look back and I think, unfortunately, through the efforts of this council and/or prior, and Maisel, can't look back, right? Let's look forward. We're late. If there's going to be a year or two gap, if all of those hurdles can't be succeeded for BSLI to continue to take garbage, and we see a drop-off of the remaining 800,000, that's going to hurt us. And so we need to move forward on BSLIs, and I think we need to move forward on KMM's PUD, because that vision is hands down preferred over anything that we've seen prior to, and including the pyramid. I mean, that is not good for the city of Burnsville. It's not good for the gateway to the city of Burnsville, and quite frankly, it's not good for the gateway of Dakota County on I-35. The largest gateway entrance into Dakota County is I-35 when people cross the river. So they're not only coming into Burnsville, they're coming into Dakota County. And so, sorry, parts of Dakota County, obviously. There's other ways to get in, but from Hennepin and Bloomington, I-35 is a big front door to the county and to the city. And so we don't like the pyramid at all. And I certainly would advocate any way I possibly can to support this plan and continue to move forward. Granted, there's discussions with Mr. McGowan, there's discussions with the MPCA, there's discussions with the DOT. I mean, you have plenty of meetings to do. But from our perspective, thank you for bringing that vision and that opportunity for us to deal with, as opposed to where, quite frankly, the track we were heading on was that pyramid. And that was absolutely unacceptable to me, anyway. Thank you.
I think the vision that you have is the right vision for Burnsville. But there are so many moving parts. And from where I sit right now, you did a big dump on us, and there's a lot of details. So what I think needs to happen is for both companies to sit down with our staff and the county and to really identify, because there's a lot of numbers that were thrown out, but I also want to make sure that we have the right, what does that mean? Are we going to be receiving any host fee when you're doing the transfer? I mean, there's a lot of details. And you also in the background suggested that you will increase your host fee from the mining side and increase your host fees. We don't have that authority. That's a legislative authority. Legislature tells us how much we can accept in host fees. Correct, Joel?
Correct.
So the thing is, you're going to have to go to the legislature, and I'm happy to go with you to get that authority that you will pay us that amount. But it'll have to be on your dime and not us getting a lobbyist to go do that. So also, Commissioner, there were some concerns that you had with regard to the one-to-one or the tonnage. So in terms of the money that comes to Burnsville and the money that goes to the county, because Burnsville is a smaller amount in those host fees from Waste Management. So Commissioner, if you can speak to that, you and George have been very good in giving us some data.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I wanted to address a comment you made, Councilmember Keeley, about taking a hit this year, which surprises me. The comment surprises me because as of August of this year, the city should have upwards of $900,000 collected because of the amount of waste that was brought into Waste Management, which was about 219,000 tons. We deal in tons, not cubic yards. And I asked George, what was the one-to-one, because you're talking cubic yards, where my nerd brain is on tons. So it's not a one-to-one. It's in our contract, it's 3.33 cubic yards per ton. At least it's in our contract with Waste Management. And in order for you to collect less than $500,000 next year, Waste Management would have to collect less than 115,000 tons of garbage. Now, and here's the part that I get a little confused about, because the county has a contract with Waste Management for minimums in dollar amounts. And our minimum dollar amount that we expect to collect next year is over $1 million, and I think it's around $1,014,750.
Approximately.
Sure that's right. Which means you would have to take in substantially less than 115,000 tons of garbage to not pay Burnsville their 500. And the way I'm looking at this is, why would you run in the red as far as collecting garbage? And some of the unknowns now also is that Great River Energy is closing. The MPCA, there aren't any other facilities out there that aren't at capacity. We know the HERC is at capacity, and the Newport facility, it's got a different name, but it's at capacity. So, in my mind, it would behoove the MPCA to allow MSW to go into the landfills, as much as that's not something they want to do. It may be something that they are forced to do because all the processing plants are at capacity. So I'm confused why Burnsville would get less than what I'm hearing. To me, Waste Management would have to stop taking garbage.
Yeah.
For you to get less than what you have been getting. Like last year, you should have received around 1.3 to 1.4 million
Yeah,
dollars.
and that's what we did.
And your trajectory is up, only going up for this year too. So I'm surprised to hear that your budget is going to have a $500,000 hole, when this is the first the county has heard about that issue and about Waste Management not continuing up with the amount of garbage that they're trash, MSW, that they would be collecting. And it's also the first we have heard about the no fees for transferring the trash from Freeway to any other facility, because that had never received any type of tipping fee. It has never been, there is no host fees, and that discussion has never taken place with the county.
Yeah.
So there are several things in this. While the plan is beautiful for Burnsville, you
There's
have
a
a lot
lot.
of discussions that
Yeah.
need to take place, not just with your the MPCA or the Army Corps of Engineers or whoever else, but you need to sit down with the county and start talking to us about how this garbage is going to be moved, whether it's going to be feed, host fees, because I brought George here, who is our Director of Environmental Resources, because honestly, we haven't heard any of this ever. And I would think if you're going to start talking about moving garbage,
Yep.
You would want to include the county in on that conversation.
Yeah. And from my perspective with that, because the county gets a big amount of fees in their contract with you, because their contract is very different from ours. Ours is based on the PUD. You have a 10-year contract with the county. Five-year contract. Oh,
Sorry.
okay. A 5-year contract with the county. Yeah. So what I want to make sure that there is conversation and there is transparency and everybody understands what's happening. And that should have our staff involved with all of those conversations, because it's important to the city of Burnsville. And it's important if you're going to, if it's going to be feed, what is it? And it's not going to come out of just Burnsville, and the county is going to say they're going to get their fee and not us. So I think there has to be a lot more discussion, and we need to, if it's going to be feed, how much is that? And then it needs to be authorized by the legislature. Dan?
I have a question. I understand Waste Management, you're going to be diverting freight to Iowa shortly.
That is
Can you
correct.
give us the reason why you would do those diversions?
Well, the reason we are looking at diverting some tonnage is two reasons. One is our capacity we have left of MSW, and the second is so that we meet the minimum fee payments in our 5-year obligation with the county. So we have to reduce our tonnage coming in so we don't run out of airspace and have to
Yeah.
pay the $1 million penalty for not accepting waste in the final year of our contract.
And
Yeah.
if you don't
Yeah.
divert and just accepted all the extra capacity that's about to come your way, how soon would you close?
We would be closed we'd be closed sometime in late 2021.
Is that the end of your contract with Waste Management? Is that the 5-year end?
See, this is our first year in the 5-year contract.
Uh-huh. So they'll be paying a
22.
penalty.
Yeah, the final year, they would have
Yeah.
they wouldn't be able to take any garbage in and
Yeah.
still have the obligation in the
So
final year of the
the
contract.
thing is, we all like what we need to do. We want to make sure, but the thing is also at the end use, having a pyramid out there with no end use. So what's the benefit to the people of Burnsville? So is it just going to be a pyramid? At least before there was going to be a recreational use. I know that in our background, and I went into the EPA website to look at other uses for closed landfills across the country. And there's a solar farm and all kinds of other things, but you can't have anything that's going to have an impact on the health of people because you don't know some of those things. So there's so much work, and our staff needs to have that work with all of you. Bill?
Just point of information for me. What, you said it could go as high as, just out of personal curiosity, 260 feet. What is it all, what's the height? So what would the ultimate height be then?
Yeah.
With what it is plus the 260, well, I'm just curious.
That would be from, say, the frontage road
Yeah,
that
so,
runs
no,
along there.
what would
How
be?
tall it is?
Yeah.
We'd be probably a total height of 300 feet, 350, 325 feet,
How tall is Buck Hill?
326 feet.
So Buck Hill is 326, and this is going to be
No,
about equal,
It
yeah.
is smaller. It's smaller than Buck Hill.
There you go.
Yeah.
Covered with snow.
It's-
Again, I like the
Zip
concept.
lines,
It's
Yeah,
just
so
kind of
I-
overwhelming to me, and I'm only going to be here for 10 more weeks, so,
Okay. So, yes,
I
Ryan.
think I might be able to provide a little bit of clarity on 500,000. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the $500,000 deficit is in budget year 2019.
Yes.
2019.
2019.
2018 does not have the
The
problem.
Yeah.
budget that we're dealing with
Yeah.
right now.
It's
As the
yeah.
diversions
18's
begin.
fine, 19's a problem.
No, but what she's saying is the projections, we shouldn't.
Well, we
Well,
should.
if they're diverting freight,
now
it
you
will,
know.
or diverting
There's
garbage,
a-
it
Yeah,
will. They'll be
they're
putting
gonna
less into
scale
it.
back, they got a slow play to meet.
And this is the reason why we need to have our staff work with Waste Management and with Kramer. This is not there's a lot of details, and we need to be very conscientious because we're the stewards for the citizens of this community. And I appreciate the commissioner sitting at our budget meeting and then saying something's not right here, and emails me and says, there's some problems. And so I invited her to be at this meeting tonight and to make sure that we're all hearing the same thing and we have transparency. Yes, Bill?
I wish I was here, but I hope you fast-track this, because I think it's a great, if you could fast-track the detailed information, but I'm sure you can't get it done in 10 weeks for me,
No.
so.
Yeah,
I would-
there's a lot of work. You've got the
I love,
MPCA,
I
you've
love
got
the
the Corps of Engineers, you have FEMA, you have the Department of Natural Resources, et cetera. So what you're saying is that you need a concept approved. I would say work with our staff, make sure that we have all of the details, because there was a lot of stuff here tonight. And we need to understand those details, and our staff need to understand, so that if a concept is put forward, we all have the same information, and I think the county should be at that table.
Just for the record, I agree with Dan that Waste
Yeah.
Management needs to get started on their PUD immediately. The concepts will come. You'll have a concept by the time you come to us with the PUD. you all have a lot of different things to jump through, you especially with the state of Minnesota. But the landfill is not really part of this PUD. It's about continuing the mining out a bit longer, which is really in line with how long it's gonna take before that, we start building out there anyway, so I don't see a real issue with that. And I hope you can put all the pieces together and be able to address the landfill as well, because that would just be a win for that entire area and for this city. And I know, talking with everybody seems to want to work together to make it happen. This is really kind of one of the first private concepts that has come to us that could address all those issues. But the main issue, we got to get the waste management to stay in business, because if they go away, the rest of it, the landfill's got a whole different outfit. Now we can go back to 135 to 150 million to clean this thing up.
Yeah, and I think this is where we just direct staff to work with both Waste Management and Kramer. And then we need to make sure that the county's at the table with all of that, because these agreements between the county and us are embedded in all of that. But, so everything is transparent. Yes, Kara?
So what is the timeline for when this would come back to us for a PUD for a concept?
Well, it's up to the applicant. They're going to have to put all of that together and present it to staff, and then staff needs to do that work, and then it comes to us. So it's up to the applicant. Yes?
What would be a projected time for that to happen?
Well, I think the first thing is waste management.
We believe we could have a concept plan delivered to the staff and be discussing it with staff within 30 days.
Within 30 days. Okay, and then within 30 days, it gives our staff, according to the law, we have 60 days for staff to work with the applicant on all of the critical pieces.
Well, we would try to
Do it
for the planning commission and final action within 60 to 90 days generally. But
Yeah.
60-day approval, but we can extend it.
Yeah, because that's the law. And then, of course, the county commissioner and George, if you can all be part of those conversations, it would be very helpful.
Thank you.
Yes.
So that 60 to 90 days is the outside, not the inside.
And
Yeah.
for a concept plan, it's very seldom that we have to do an extension.
Thank you.
So that's where it's at. Everybody is in agreement with a beautiful vision. But John, you and I have had this conversation. There's a lot of work to be done. And we can move forward with all of that. And Mike, there's a lot of work. You've got a lot of agencies that you have to go before. And then if there are legislative issues, we need to know that so that it can be part of our priority. But you're going to carry the water, and we'll be supportive if you're going to increase the fees for us. Yes,
May I ask a question?
absolutely, Commissioner.
Thank you. Does your plan include transferring the garbage from Freeway over to wherever it is you're going to put it?
Our initial PUD is to really, as it relates to Freeway, is to generate the airspace that we could accept Freeway. I guess ultimately, what we'd be looking at would be a third PUD down the road where it involved the relocation of Freeway, which that one we aren't to the point of concept on yet.
Correct.
Okay,
Mike still owns the property.
yeah, well, that's why I'm saying there's a lot of work to be done.
Yep.
A lot of work to be done.
That's
And the other is that when you're looking at your airspace height, you're saying that the concept is to be able to include the waste from Freeway.
Yes.
If that doesn't happen, then what?
Stay in business.
Well,
Let me just clarify what I said earlier. BSLI's PUD amendment is a win for them and a win for the city, because they're gonna run out of space for solid municipal waste. We have to give this PUD amendment a look and expand that just for us as a city to continue to take host fees in and tipping fees, which we are relatively reliant on, because it's a big piece of land that doesn't have buildings on it paying property taxes. So aside from the bigger vision, we need to address BSLI now.
And I
For our
would,
own good. And
yeah.
the
and
county's gonna
I
benefit
don't
from
think
that as well,
anybody
obviously,
is arguing against that. I just want to make sure that when you look at your airspace, that it's not just a pyramid, but there has to be some kind of end use that will benefit the people of Burnsville when it gets to that time.
You bet.
Because we have an end use plan on the books right now. And that end use plan on the books is recreation.
Yes.
Okay. Dana?
So, Madam Mayor, members of the council, just so I'm clear, what I'm hearing in terms of what the takeaways are is that city staff will include county in the conversations going forward. We'll make sure that we extend those invitations out to them and they're included in those discussions. And that the staff will continue to work with both KMM and Waste Management to bring separate concept PUD amendments forward. And then as part of that, we are going through our legislative priorities right now. And so if there are legal or legislative issues that should be identified that could be incorporated into our legislative priorities as the session begins in January, that should come forward through staff as well.
I think that's it, yes.
As we're bringing the county in, we're bringing the county in to make them aware of what we're doing. They're
That's
not
right.
there for approval.
That's right.
All right, just for awareness, for informational
Yeah.
purposes only. All right, thank you.
Yeah, the county is there because, from my perspective, they have an agreement that also speaks to us. Yes, Bill?
Just as a suggestion, next time we have this gathering, if I'm still here or not here, inviting the local legislators, I think would have been very helpful, so they could hear this and hear this. Because it's going to be a big part of your thing, so.
Yeah. Well, as we continue to move forward, so, Council, what Dana had articulated is what you understand, the direction?
Absolutely.
Okay, Kara? Yeah? Dan?
What's that? Yes.
Yeah. Bill? Okay, you have it.
Thank you.
So, Kristen, John, and Mike, you work with Dana and Joel, and the county is going to be at the table simply because they have an agreement that I now understand, and I'm really grateful to learning that there was a minimum, and that includes the county taking care of the city of Burnsville. Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Just like, wait a minute here.
Yeah.
We're still out, even though
Yeah.
our minimum
Yeah.
is over $1 million.
Yeah.
We would still be
Yeah,
down
$2
2
million. But when you wrote your agreement, there's a minimum.
for us.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So we need to understand what that minimum is as we continue to move forward. Okay? And you want to know whether it's going to be feed or not feed. So all of those things are part of the discussion and the transparency.
With regard to fees, Burnsville Sanitary Landfill Waste Management is always happy to collect a fee from people and pass it on to the cities
Yeah.
and counties that want it. It's just, whoever's funding it is gonna have to pay the fee. That's why we were suggesting that would be a feeless transfer of waste, because we don't know the funding source yet.
Well, that's a piece that we have to all talk about.
One of three pieces.
Yeah, that's a piece we all have to talk about. Yes, John?
And if I may, that was also addressed at one of our early meetings with the MPCA and their staff, and city staff was also there. There was 25, 26, 28 people at that meeting. And MPCA addressed fees on the transfer of this waste as well. And their point, in their opinion at that point, was fees have been collected on this waste once before. In whatever shape or fashion, it might not be exactly the same shape or fashion that fees are currently collected, but from 69 to the closure of that freeway landfill, fees were collected. And that was the MPCA's words, not mine. So, but from the very first meeting that I had with city staff, that was brought to me by a question, I met with Ryan and Jenny, and from day one, and Kramer will go on the record saying, we have no problem entertaining the idea of host fees, but it should never be a gun to our head that you will not get approval unless host fees are a consideration. I don't believe that's what we're hearing here, but I just want to make sure that we've been upfront from the very first meeting we've ever had with any city staff, and everybody since, certainly coming from my mouth, that we are not opposed to having conversations about host fee. We believe this opportunity is once in a lifetime. It's an extraordinary opportunity to do something right for the whole South Metro area. And host fees on our part, because there's a benefit to Kramer as well on this whole project, are something we're absolutely willing to consider. Absolutely. It's nothing we're turning up our head to at all.
Okay.
And there is no panacea in our mind. We realize and understand how complicated this process is. And we've had, I can't tell you how many hundreds of hours of conversations. I probably could. I'd go back and look at our legal bills. But we've had hundreds of hours of conversations with agencies from the highest level of state, local representatives. It's a great point, Councilman Coughlin. We met with Roz Peterson and other elected officials and got there, does this make sense or does this not make sense? Does it pass the sniff test? Are you an advocate? Do you believe this is a vision worth pursuing? To the MPCA, to the highest levels of MnDOT, Commissioner Zelli at a meeting last week, to MMB next week. The very first conversation I ever had before I had any other conversation with anybody was with Mike McGowan himself. And it was a simple, is this worthy, or is this an idea that you would like to pursue? And I got an agreement from him with no details, but yeah, let's see if we can get this done. And that started this ball, but we have no illusions that this is going to be a simple process, but it's a worthwhile process, and therefore we're willing to put in the efforts.
Thank you. Liz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not trying to argue with you, okay? I just want to preface that.
Well, I don't believe, I
But
didn't sense you were trying to argue with
Okay,
me.
good. Because the tax that you're referring to, the solid waste management tax, that's what that was. It wasn't a host fee or a tipping fee or anything like that, and it went directly to the state. It was maybe about $200,000. So that wasn't anything that the city or the county received. It was a solid waste management tax.
Okay.
We all still pay.
Okay, thank you. And I was very clear when you and I had a conversation, so that's, but that was all the details you all have to work with our staff.
Sure.
So when that concept comes, now we have something to address, so we can all do that. So the direction, our staff knows, work with them. You have 30 days to bring in your concept, and then that'll allow you to meet with all of the other agencies. Because this process, as I see it, Mike, the concept plan just gives you an instrument to talk to all of the other agencies, and it's about 2 or 3 years out.
Yeah.
Because you have an EIS, and that's about a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with John, you just have a lot of work to do real quickly.
I'm a pretty good juggler, Mayor.
Because County 35W is being built. It's right now, and next year, they're gonna do a whole lot of work, so you've got a lot of stuff to do between now and then.
Amen.
Yeah, December 31st.
It's a 4-year project.
Yeah, but they have to get the approval to to do the engineering work to go underneath the road.
If I may, the reason why we believe that's so important, the culvert concept.
Yeah.
The box culvert, it replaces 58,000 truckloads of waste being transferred on public right-of-way, about 38,000 hours of truck traffic in a Cliff Road 35W.
Well, I
Spaghetti.
also see it as an amenity after it's all done, as a bike trail.
Exactly.
And, yes,
Although,
Yeah.
I assume that we're bringing this to close pretty soon.
Yeah.
There's one gentleman in the room that I think we ought to at least invite to comment if he would like to, Mr. McGowan.
yes.
He may not want to,
Mike,
but
do
I
you
think
want to
the
comment?
invitation should be extended.
Thank you for recognizing us. I appreciate the opportunity. I hope John Levisto and Mike Miller are able to pull several rabbits out of a hat I would be remiss in saying that there have been statements presented this evening that are not entirely true, misleading, and inaccurate that at some point in time, I hope we have the opportunity to clear up.
Okay, very good. All right, I think everything is, are you okay with what's been presented, Mike?
I am, yes. Thank you,
John?
Mayor.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and staff, you have direction. Are there any other comments? There are none, we stand adjourned by acclamation. Thank you, everybody.